Good day, everyone. I'm here again to continue writing our hypothetical journal article and teaching you in this tutorial on how to write a journal article by teaching you now how to write the discussion and conclusion section of your article. So remember that our working title is Hotspots, Times and Targets of Robberies in Dumaguete City, Negros Oriental, Philippines. And the purpose statement of our study is the purpose of the study is to determine the hotspots, places, and targets of robberies in Dumaguete City, Negros Oriental, Philippines from 2020 to 2022. Specifically, the study aims to determine the places and times where robberies commonly occur. In addition, the study seeks to determine the common items taken by robbers. We have already written the introduction, methodology, the literature review, the results section. I've also created tutorials on how to analyze simple statistics for your descriptive study. Remember always that this is a hypothetical study only. I have made up some of the details in this hypothetical study only. This is not a true study. I have just made this up just to illustrate how to write the different sections of your journal article in an APA format. So today we are going to write the discussion section and the conclusion section. These are the last sections of your journal article. Then after this, I will create another tutorial, last tutorial on how to craft your title and the abstract and combining everything that we have written so far. So a discussion section, I structure my discussion section typically like this. At the first paragraph, I restate the objectives of and importance of the study. So I restate what are the objectives. The objectives can be found from the purpose statement. Then next, I state the main findings. Don't forget only the main findings of the study, the meat of your study. So in this study, we focus on the hotspots, hot times, and hot products. So we'll discuss it. Now, I'll state the main findings relevant to these main topics in our purpose statement. Then, what are the theoretical importance? How do the findings relate to the previous theory that we have cited in our literature review? Do the findings in our study contradict or do they agree with the past theories? And the same with the past studies that we have cited in our literature review. Do our findings contradict or do they agree or support the previous studies of the results of previous studies? So that's what we call theoretical importance, the third paragraph of your discussion section. And the fourth paragraph is the practical importance of your findings. So I'll state the general implications for practice. Practical importance meaning how could we apply the findings into the real world in solving and fighting against robberies? So implications on policing, implications on families, implications on vulnerable groups or the most at-risk group of being victims of robberies. The next, I'll state also the weaknesses or limitations of the study. General limitations, specific limitations, and also based on the limitations, what are the future research that we could suggest for researchers to do in order to address these weaknesses. Then I'll also write the conclusion section. It's just a very short section, just a one paragraph session. I'll recap the main findings and the general implications of the main findings. So if we have the main findings, one could ask, so what? After you have already derived all the findings in your study, one could ask, so what? What is the implication? So we'll state it later. Then theoretical implications and practical implications will recap what we have said in the discussion section. So basically, the discussion section and conclusion section answers your introduction and literature review. No, and it merges the results section and the literature review. So it it puts into juxtaposition the literature review versus the results. How do the findings in our study relate to our literature review or to the literature that we have cited in our study? Do our findings agree, or do they contradict the previous theory or research conducted by other researchers? So let us start writing our discussion section. So the first paragraph is the restatement of your objectives and the importance of your study. So let us restate the objectives. The objectives can be found from your purpose statement. So let us restate the objectives. This study seeks to determine the patterns of robberies in time, in space, time, and targets. Specifically, the study aimed to explore the hotspots, hot times, and hot products of robberies in Dumaguete City, Negros Oriental, Philippines. Then next, we cite the theoretical importance. Theoretical or academic importance of the study. This study is important in filling significant gaps in the literature. So what were the gaps in the literature that we cited in our previous tutorial in writing our introduction and writing our literature review? So let us have a recap. So I have duplicated the our tutorial material for easy reference. So here you can find in our literature review that we have written in the past the gaps in the literature, like these ones. The findings, previous studies were limited. There were few studies on hotspots and hot times. There were no studies on hot products. Then there's a need for more recent data because those data are outdated. Okay, so let us cite it. There has been a very limited number of studies in the Philippines on robberies, especially on the use of the environmental criminology perspective. Environmental criminology and opportunity perspective. Also, or moreover, previous research did not deal with hot products, and there is a need for more recent data to describe the nature of robbery. Okay, so that's the theoretical and academic importance of your study. So in this first paragraph, we have the objectives and the importance. Next, let's go to the second paragraph where we restate the main findings. So in the main findings of your study, so if you remember in our previous tutorial, we found that hotspots were located in 4 areas. So there were a presence of hotspots of robberies, meaning the robberies were non-randomly distributed. In other words, robbers tend to choose their victims and tend to choose the places where they commit their crimes, and these places tend to cluster. So with this, we can predict when the robbers will strike next, and we can with this we can also use police resources and other resources properly, efficiently, by looking at these hotspots, to use the hotspots policing. We'll discuss it later. The results of the study shows that robberies just let's add another row. Let's have a general findings. The result of a study show that robberies are non-randomly distributed across space, time, and targets. Let's go to hotspots. Specifically, robberies tended to occur in places with hospitals, malls, capitol buildings, call centers, and business establishments in the city. Let us go to hot times. If you remember in our previous tutorial, so hot times, let's just assume let's assume that these are the findings for our hot times. Moreover, robberies clustered in colder months than in hotter ones. And during weekends, at dawn, at night time, and dawn. Let's go to hot products. What are the main takeaways? Robbers commonly stole motorcycles. Not motorcycle. Robbers commonly stole cash and electronic gadgets, especially smartphones. So we have already the main findings. Let's go to the theoretical importance of these findings. How do these findings relate to the theory that we have cited? So let us go back to our literature review. Let's go to the first. We cited environmental criminology. Then we cited next the rational choice perspective, then the crime, the routine activity approach, and the crime pattern theory. So we will cite them, no, as general implication for our study. So general implication, these findings lend support to the environmental criminology perspective in proposing that crimes are rational. Crimes are rational and tend to occur where victims and offenders commonly converge. So let us cite worthily for this. So what you have cited in the literature review, you can also cite in your discussion. Let's insert this here. It further supports the rational choice perspective, routine activity approach. So we are now stating something about the theory, that our findings relate to the theory, that they support the theories that we have cited earlier in our literature review. Routine activity approach and crime pattern theory. So let us cite the works for this. So for rational choice perspective, we cite Cornish and Clark. So we place it here. For routine activity approach, we cite Cohen and Felson. This one, Cohen and Felson, Marcos Felson, Lawrence Cohen. Then for crime pattern theory, we cite Brantingham and Brantingham. Okay, so we have now stated that our findings support the perspective that we are using in the study, citing in our study, and the theories within this perspective. So let's now go to the hotspots. The presence of hotspots robbery hotspots also support previous research that have found robberies to cluster in space. For example, the EG here, for example, for those studies, let's go to the next section, hotspots. Study of Sherman. For example, Sherman et al. Herman Connelly. Okay, you may not cite everything, just cite select ones like 3 so that you'll not be filled with citations. Okay, hot times. terms of hard times, the present study supports other research, or are in line, the present study is in line with other research. Cite hard times, other research in London and Glasgow. In other countries, with research in other countries. Such as in London and Glasgow. So we cite Thompson and Bowers. What else? Philadelphia, Haberman and Radcliffe. Philadelphia, Haberman and Radcliffe. Next, Germany. Open parenthesis, close parenthesis. Okay, just cite select ones. How about hot products? The findings, finally, the findings on the hot products are in line with the research in hot products. Los Angeles by Garrett and Clark. Los Angeles. So we replace and with an ampersand when we use parenthetical citation. New York by Thompson. Then the last one in Brazil by Oliveira. And in Brazil. So you have now the theoretical implication. By the way, we can add one sentence here summing up. Thus, the findings imply that rubbers tend to be rational in terms of choosing the places, times, and products to attack. Okay, that's, you can add more lines, but as of now, that's it. Let's go to the practical importance. Practical importance, as I said earlier, says something about what do our findings imply for practice. How do we change practice? How do we change policy? How do we change policies? How do we advise families? How do we advise the common victims? So let's start writing. Practical importance. The findings are also important. The findings also have important practical implications. Okay, that's the general implication. Now let's go to policing. For instance, police officers may employ the hotspots policing by considering by deploying police resources during in hotspots times and hot times, by deploying more police resources in hotspots and hot times. So meaning police officers should not discriminately patrol anywhere but in hotspots, no? But in hotspots and during hot times, so that there will be efficient use of resources. So this strategy is to ensure the efficient use of limited, because police officers have limited resources. Police resources. Implications on families. For families, their heads in families or families must also exert or exercise. Family heads must also exercise prudence and proper supervision, must also exercise proper supervision of their members. When they go out to criminogenic places such as malls and in the business district. How about vulnerable groups? For people to avoid victimization, they should be extra vigilant in the hotspots and during hot times of robbery in the city. So we have now the practical implication. You can add more, but for this time, one paragraph is enough. How about the weaknesses? What are the general limitations of this study? Although, let's start the general limitations. Although the study is important in filling gaps, although the study has filled important gaps in the literature, there are several weaknesses of the study that need to be addressed by future research. So specifically, what are these? For instance, the study only focused on one chartered city. Thus, the findings cannot be generalized to other cities in the province and in other provinces, especially in highly urbanized areas. What else? The data is also limited since police data suffers often from the dark figure, meaning there are other crimes that have not yet been reported. Many crimes, many victims tend not to report their victimization. What else? For now, that will be enough. You can cite others, you can think of others, but to save time, that is enough. So how about suggestion for future research? In suggestion for future research, you look at the gaps. These are the gaps of research, the gaps of our research that future researchers can fill. So meaning this can be the basis of the future researchers in conducting their research. They can cite this study and conduct their own study and argue that they are important because we have cited the weaknesses of our study, and they use those weaknesses as the reason why they conduct their study. So future research. Nevertheless, future research can address these limitations by expanding the number of cities to be studied, and future researchers may employ other methods like survey and like to address the validity, to address the issue on dark figure, on the dark figure. Figure of robberies. So we are now done with our discussion section. So let us proceed to our conclusion section. Generally, start with the main findings. Generally, the study found that robberies ended robberies in Dumaguete City tended to occur in tended to cluster in space, time, and targets. So what is the general application of this? This implies this pattern implies that robbers are rational in committing robberies by choosing the locations and the locations, times, and targets to ensure their success. So theoretical implication. This supports the environmental criminology perspective and the opportunity theories of crime. And practical implication. Thus, robberies may be addressed by systematic policing and crime prevention activities that focus not only on the social not on social demographics, but also on locations, and times when robberies commonly occur. Okay, there you have it. We have already written our discussion section and our conclusions section. This is just the draft. In your succeeding drafts, you can revise it, you can include more paragraphs, but these are just the basic paragraphs. So we have the restatement of the objectives and importance. The first paragraph, we have the main findings. Second paragraph, third paragraph, theoretical importance of the findings. The fourth paragraph, the practical importance of the findings. Fifth paragraph, the weaknesses of our study. Then we have the conclusion. In our next tutorial, I'll teach you to wrap it up, your journal article, and that will be the last step, and you will complete your journal article. So thank you very much for listening and watching this tutorial. Have a good day, everyone, and God bless.